Hello, this is Debbie Lynn Toomey, Tufts Medical Center's Injury Prevention Coordinator. You're watching Aging Strong, which is an outreach program for older adults. It's meant to empower older adults with pertinent and practical information that can help them live quality lives. And today's guest speaker is Michelle Woodbury, and she is one of the co-owners of Two Sisters Senior Living Advisor. Her topic is really amazing. It's called Defining Your Aging Goals. Michelle, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. Do you want me just to sort of introduce myself and go from there?
I think that would be great. I was just telling you before we came on, I have sisters too, and I really love the name of your company. So can you just tell us about your background and what led you into doing services for seniors?
Yeah, absolutely. It goes way back, so I'll make a really long story short. And our father was a nursing home administrator, and our mom was a geriatric physical therapist. And so I didn't go to daycare. My sister and I grew up in a nursing home, and that definitely shifted our perspective on our place in the world. And so my sister and I have done pretty much every job there is in assisted living communities, including she was a resident care. She was a certified nursing assistant, and I started as an activities director, but we both ended up sort of on the sales and marketing side because we saw so many of our residents resistant to the idea of change and moving. And then after they did move in, realized that things were much better and much easier for them in most circumstances. So we wanted to get involved with families to help them see that this could be an opportunity. It's not necessarily just a burden, something we have to do, but it could actually be a positive thing. And our father was diagnosed with Parkinson's about 15 years ago. And when that happened, we kind of knew it was on our radar that we would be moving back to Massachusetts because we were in states out west. And when we got here, we realized there weren't any referral services, consulting agencies like ours. If somebody wanted help to navigate these senior living choices, then, they could hire an aging life care professional, or they kind of had to figure it out on their own. And so we're going into our 13th year. Now we were the first referral service here in Massachusetts. And we specialize in, we specialize in helping people understand the bigger picture. What is it that they need to know overall about planning for senior care? I think that I see a lot of other professionals touch upon one aspect, but very few people are looking at this whole picture. And so this presentation is designed to help do that. I think the driving factor behind the plan really does need to be the budget. And then you have to know what you're trying to achieve so that you can figure out if your budget will take you there. And so this presentation is sort of designed to highlight that. How does that sound? Does that sound okay?
Sounds good. That sounds good. Actually, I was jotting down some notes before we even came on air today. And one of the things that really popped into my line of view was the fact that the U.S. Census data for 2020 said that there's fewer than half of the working age Americans that have retirement savings. And you said budget has a lot to do with a person's aging plan, at least to achieve the plan that they want, not what the state, has for them. So it's really, really interesting. And also people who are retiring now at age 65, they're expected to live another 20 years.
Right.
So, I
don't know many people who are retiring at 65.
Yes, I know, because now the retirement age is going up depending on the year that you were born. But it's really interesting to see how the savings really is the driving force and the quality of life that people are imagining. People think of retirement as like, okay, I'm just going to chill. I will not have any stress. I will wake up whenever I want. But that's not really, maybe for a day or two, and then reality sinks in, right?
It depends. Like, I think that, my parents, for example, my dad was young. I mean, he was 65 probably when he started showing symptoms, and they didn't get the retirement that they had dreamed of. There was never a time. By the time my dad stopped working, he was already feeling unwell, and they never got the retirement that they hoped that they would get. And I'm finding that a lot of people are working much later and are missing out on that. But the other thing that I think is really important to point out is that when people do plan, they plan for their active retirement. What am I going to do while am I going to just sit around and relax and wake up when I want? Or how much money am I going to need? And what is my life going to look like when I retire? And then people also plan for when they pass away. They plan their will and their estate and what's going to go to the children and who's their power of attorney. But very few people plan for that in between phase, when you're not just actively retired and you're also, not deceased. And the numbers, I forget exactly what year the study was, but I believe it was Genworth Financial put out a study that said 7 out of 10 people will need help with at least one activity of daily living at some point of their life. So what that means is basically 70% of us are going to not be independent at some point, and very few people are planning for that. But the chances are greater than not that we're going to need it. So I think that it's kind of like the seatbelt analogy. We don't put a seatbelt on with the intention of going out and getting into an accident. But if it happens, then we're hoping it will lessen the impact and minimize the damage. And so I think the same is true with planning for senior care. A lot of people want to stay home, and that's fine. Continue on the path that you're on, but it's smart to have a plan in place, because if something does happen, you're better off having a plan in place than the other way around and not having one when you really need one. So
totally, it's a great point. That's a very good point. Yeah. And it's actually a very loving and a thoughtful thing to do, especially if you have family who are going to be your future caregivers, to be able to give them a plan. So today, you've got a beautiful presentation. So, if you want to get that started, please do so. Yeah. And I'd love to continue the conversation as you're presenting. This is a really amazing topic.
There's my sister. A lot of people don't believe she exists, because I am the one that does all the talking and she's the one that's mainly behind the scenes. But we're going to talk about our aging goals. I'm not going to go through this whole presentation because I don't necessarily have time for it, but we're going to touch upon each of these things, and then you can reach out to me if you want more information. But I think that the analogy that I like to use, let's see, I think it might be my next slide. No, it's going to be a couple slides ahead. Let me see. I'm going to scroll. Yeah, there it is. The analogy I like to use is, let's say you are going on a road trip, and pick your favorite destination. I don't know. I always pick on Denver, but let's say we're heading from Massachusetts to Denver, and we don't have a map or a GPS, and we don't know how much money we have for gas. What are the chances that we're going to get to Denver? I don't know. Chance of me, probably very slim, but we could get there, but you're going to take a lot of wrong turns. You're going to spend a lot of time that you didn't need to spend. It's going to take you a lot longer to get to Denver. And if you don't have enough money for the gas to get there, you're going to have to find the resources in order to finish that trip. So should you start out and head to Denver and then figure it out as you go? Or should we kind of figure out if we have all the resources we need, get a map, get a GPS, and then head out to Denver? That makes more sense, right? So I'm hoping that I can provide some sort of a map. And yeah, I can be your GPS if you want, but this presentation is to sort of talk about the map. So in order to know where we're going, in my example, I just used Denver, we have to decide where we're going with our goals. There aren't that many that I've come across in all these years that I've been doing this. The number one is that people want to spend the end of their life at home. And I hear a lot of different versions of that, but I'm going out of this house feet first. You're going to have to carry me out in a box. I mean, just most people are very comfortable in their own home, and they can't imagine that anything else from that. So that's the most common goal that I hear. The second is I want to avoid ever going to a nursing home. Unfortunately, a lot of people have both of those goals. I shouldn't say unfortunately. Many people have both of those goals, but unfortunately, they aren't always both possible. So, and this often comes down to a financial thing. So if there's a couple, then sometimes the priority is to stay together. Sometimes people have done estate planning and they've moved their money so it's protected from Medicaid, and they intend to preserve assets to pass down to their children. I don't come across that and too much, but I do. It does. There are families like that, and I hear a lot of people saying they don't want to be a burden on their kids. I do come across people that are like, oh, well, I raised them and I took care of them, so now is the time where they need to take care of me. But the vast majority of people feel bad about leaving their loved ones with the responsibility of figuring all this out. So we can accomplish several of those things by talking about how to reach each of these goals. Already did that slide. So first of all, like I've oversimplified this to an extraordinary degree. Like it's almost laughable, but I think it paints a really good picture of what options exist. And so it's almost like reducing, you boil something forever and you just reduce it down to like its most simplest essence. But here in Massachusetts, there's only 3 types of places that somebody could live. And the first, and these are buckets. I should redesign the slide and put buckets. The first one is home with care. And that is an option for people. And there's a lot of different moving parts to that plan, in addition to arranging care, making sure that the home is set up for success, and that meals and housekeeping and all of the things come together so that somebody can successfully stay at home. I talk a lot about that. People can want to stay at home, but really you want to successfully stay at home. Otherwise, you're going to end up going back and forth from rehab to the hospital, home, and it's going to be that cycle. But so that's one option. The second option or bucket is what I call a private pay community care setting. This includes a lot of different options that I've all thrown in together, but pretty much anywhere that you need to move out if you've run out of money. And that includes the assisted livings, the independent livings, memory care, most of the rest homes. It's not senior housing. Senior housing is sort of before that, and it's subsidized senior housing. And the bulk of what I do is for people that are beyond senior housing. I do work with people who are relatively independent, but the vast majority of my clients already sort of have a care need. And so we're really looking at these other options. I will say, if you think you might benefit or you think your loved one might benefit from income-based senior housing at any point in the future, get on the wait list. You can get on the wait list for all the towns around you, but the wait lists were significant before COVID, and they're worse now. So absolutely get on the wait list for senior housing. People who call me and want senior housing now, it's tough. There's not much available. So the private pay community care setting includes all the places where if you run out of money, you have to move out. And the third bucket is nursing home care. My goal, Allison and I, our goal when we started this company was to keep people out of nursing homes whenever possible. And there are only two reasons why somebody, is this my next slide? Nope. There are only two reasons why somebody would need to live in a nursing home long-term, at least here in Massachusetts. One of those reasons is if their care needs cannot be met in any other setting. So if somebody's care needs are so great that home care is not sufficient and they cannot stay in an assisted living, then they would need to go into a nursing home. Assisted living is not black or white. So can you go into assisted living is not a yes or no question. There are some assisted living communities that can do everything a nursing home can do, except by regulation, what only a nursing home can do. And typically those are skilled care, like injections, if significant wound management, if any kinds of tubes, usually feeding tubes, and really heavy medical things really need to be accommodated in a nursing home. But short of that, even if somebody is requiring two people to help them with their activities of daily living, getting up, getting dressed, going to the bathroom, taking a shower, there are assisted living communities that can accommodate that, and very, very high levels of care. But they're private pay. So if you run out of money, you need to move out.
So
The
Michelle,
other reason, yeah.
Michelle, quick question. You mentioned that, there's a long waiting list to get into the senior housing. So who would people, if they still want to, try their luck, who would they talk to? Do they go to the Council of Aging and then find out from there?
Yeah, the Council on Aging is a good place to start. They have their outreach. Folks have a ton of information on where to apply for senior housing. Each area, I want to say county, but it isn't necessarily by county. Of course, why make things so easy? There's also Aging Service Access Points. They're called ASAPs. And each area has an ASAP. They all function a little differently, but essentially do the same thing. But that is where Elder Services is out of, and there's a number of programs they have there for people, not just people who need income-based support services, but there are a lot of income-based support programs, even with regard to having some care in the home. People can access. There are programs like the Frail Elder Waiver and some programs that will help pay for some costs in home. But if somebody really needs 24-hour around the clock care, that really can't necessarily, it's very difficult to meet that with a limited budget at home or somewhere else outside of a nursing home, which brings me sort of full circle. So the two reasons why somebody lives in a nursing home, one is if their care needs can't be met anywhere else. The other is if they can't afford the care they need anywhere else. So if somebody doesn't have the money to pay privately at either at home or in a private pay setting like an assisted living, then they can go on to Mass Health. And when somebody is eligible for Mass Health, and I am not a Mass Health expert, I do have resources I can point you in the direction of if you have questions about Mass Health. But when somebody does qualify, there are two qualification factors in order to get into a nursing home covered by Mass Health. One is you have to have the care needs, and then two is you have to meet the criteria financially. So if you it's an interesting dynamic, but when somebody moves into a nursing home on Mass Health, everything they need is paid for. They will take all of that person's income, except for $72.80. But they no longer need co-pays or medication costs, food costs, utilities. It's all included in the nursing home. So that's what happens. If somebody doesn't have money and they need care, then they can go, nursing home care is where they can receive the support they need.
Now, would you happen to know the average amount of years a person stays in a nursing home?
Yeah, I don't. That's a good question. But in assisted living, I know that the average length of stay in assisted living is 2.5 years.
Oh,
Roughly, I know. And one of the reasons for that is because people wait so long to move in. And it's like I said, there's a really big benefit. And almost all the clients after 12 years of doing this, the vast majority of my clients are so glad that they made the transition, that it helps me wake up every day and sort of do this over and over and over again, because I see the positive results. It's very hard for people to, I think, like, the human being can't really envision the positive things that could come out of something we've never experienced before. So the perceived value, what we think we're going to get, has to outweigh what we feel we're giving up before we're going to make a major transition or spend a lot of money. And either you can find something that is like awesome, and that is why you want to move, or you wait until the pain of staying where you are is too much and you have to move. And that's when people tend to move into assisted livings, or memory care, independent living, even nursing homes. But again, that's one I understand putting off much longer. But yeah, I think that's one of the big. So those are the three buckets: home care, private pay setting, or nursing home care. And I think it's important for people to understand the differences between those. And so here's how the cost breaks down. I haven't revisited this slide in a couple months, so actually might be off just a little bit. But home care in Massachusetts, and this is an average, it's a little bit more like towards Metro West and East from there. But home care is about $40 an hour. And if you need 24-hour care, which I'm not saying everybody who has home care does, but if we're planning to go to Denver, if you're planning to stay home, then plan for, can you afford to have 24-hour care if the time comes where you need it? If the answer to that is no, then you need a backup plan. You don't have enough money to have gas to get to Denver. At some point, you're gonna run out of gas and run out of money, and you're gonna be, I don't know, in Iowa or Ohio. I guess Ohio would be this side. So you want to plan ahead. And so $30,000 a month, roughly, it costs to stay at home. And that is not including food costs, homeowners insurance, real estate taxes, utilities, or anything like that. So it's expensive. It's the most expensive option if somebody needs 24-hour in-home support. And it's the most difficult because it's not just straightforward. It requires a lot of, like I said earlier, there are a lot of moving parts. And what happens if the caregiver calls out, and, or there's all sorts of variables. Live-in care is also a way that people stay at home. You can have somebody living in your house or your apartment. They have to have a bedroom, and they need to be given, I think it's 5.5 hours of consecutive time to sleep. So if somebody really does need eyes on them 24 hours a day, a live-in may not work, or sometimes family members will step in and cover when the live-in is having their time off. But it's, again, not completely straightforward. I will say, I learned this a couple years ago, and I always just like to put this out there. If you are going to hire a live-in caregiver, read up on the laws, because my understanding is that if they live in the house full time, and there's a length of time, I don't think it's very much, but if they live in the house full time and it doesn't work out and you want to fire the caregiver, you may also have to evict them. So just check and make sure what the rules are. Most of the agencies that I work with don't staff a live-in that way. They have 4 days on and 3 days off, or they'll do 1 week on. And so there's 2 different caregivers that are switching off. And so no one person lives there, even though you have people around the clock. So anyway, just a little disclaimer there. Nursing home.
Quick question. So the professional or the caregiver that is living there, are they nurses or are they home health aides, or are they?
Well, I think most of them are home health aides.
Okay.
You might be able to find a nurse, but most people don't need a nurse. The only reason you would need a nurse would be, again, if you have injections that need to be done, or wound care, or again, feeding tubes and things like that. But a home health aide or a certified nursing assistant, the difference is that the care is not medical. The care that we receive for our activities of daily living, or ADLs, is custodial care. Things like going to the bathroom, getting from your bed to the sink to brush your teeth. All of those things are non-medical care needs. They're custodial care needs. And so they need to be done by a trained professional, but it doesn't require an RN. And that would be extremely expensive to have an RN live in. But if you're lucky enough to find one and you can afford it, then absolutely, that's a good way to go. But it is expensive. Nursing home care, I talked to somebody who was out in Western Massachusetts yesterday, and they told me that the nursing home is $400 a day. So it's significantly less, it seems like. But $500 a day is the average in this part of Massachusetts, which is $15,000 a month. Now, if you can't pay privately, then you can go on to Mass Health and live in a nursing home. My strong recommendation, if there's enough money but not a lot of money, is to go into the nursing home paying privately for a couple months if you can, and then spend down and go on to Mass Health once you're in a nursing home. There's a lot here. This is a whole presentation all of its own, the nursing home stuff. So I'm just touching upon it here, but I just want to show you the comparison in cost. Memory care, if somebody needs or would benefit from being in a secure memory care neighborhood, because their cognitive decline is such that they really need a lot of support in order to feel like they are okay from day to day, then memory care assisted living is typically more expensive. And these numbers are off. I need to update them, because even in the last couple months since I created this slide, the numbers have gone up. So I would say memory care is on average, $9,000 to $10,000 a month. And I'm seeing assisted living, yeah, I think it's $8,000 is still realistic. It depends. There's a few factors that contribute to the cost. If both of these, location is one of them. There are certain areas that are definitely more expensive. They're the same areas that real estate is more expensive but also it has to do with the cost of care, the size and the style of the apartment. But there's a few factors that contribute to the cost here. But assisted living, as you can see here, if somebody does need support, not necessarily 24-hour care, but 24-hour supervision or support, assisted living is the least expensive option. Of course, somebody doesn't need 24-hour home care, it's going to be less expensive than that. So there's usually a tipping point between a certain number of hours of home care versus becomes more expensive than moving into an assisted living. And for everybody, that's a little bit different, like 4 or 6 hours of home care plus all the other expenses of staying home is more expensive in most circumstances than moving into an assisted living. Another thing I'll say just quickly is that home care is not all it's cracked up to be for some people. It's great, and I'm not an advocate against home care, but I can tell you that in my personal experience, my dad, number of years ago, this was sort of our watershed event. Everything changed after that. But my dad, it was impulsive to begin with, but Parkinson's does cause impulsiveness. He decided to climb up a 10-foot aluminum ladder to hang a picture above a credenza, and the ladder fell over. And fortunately, he only broke his ankle. It could have been a lot worse. But having Parkinson's, he wasn't able to use crutches or a walker. So he had to have a wheelchair for a while, and he needed help. My mom couldn't do it. So we brought in 24-hour home care for a little while, and it just about drove my mom insane. My dad didn't seem to care. He, the caregiver will come in and provide the care, and he's a little bit more laid back. But my mom felt like she had to entertain somebody who was in their house 24 hours a day. My mom's not really a small talker, and so some of these caregivers would just talk and go on and on and on about their lives and their kids and all this stuff. And my mom was like, leave me alone. And they would try to be helpful by by doing some light housekeeping, putting dishes away. But for my mom, like, that was even more annoying because things were never where she thought they were going to be when she was looking for them. I just want to point out that a lot of people do want to stay at home, but when they have home care, they feel like somebody's hovering over them. And when they move into an assisted living or a memory care or even an independent living, you have your own apartment. The care comes in and helps you when you need it, if you call for it, or if it's scheduled, and then they go away and you can close the door and you have. So assisted living actually offers a lot of people more privacy than they think. And I'm not trying to push assisted living. I just know that, again, so many of my clients are glad that they made that decision. And it's the most cost effective way to get 24-hour supervision.
Yeah. And there are some buildings out there that are a combination independent living and assisted living. So for people who are needing a place, an apartment per se, and they happen to be in the same building structure as the assisted living part, they're able to see that there's almost like a seamless transition. If, they get to a point where they do need, meals prepared for them or, supervision as far as nursing goes, right?
Yes. And there's a number of different ways to do that. There's a few different models of continuing care, but sometimes people move into independent living and before they move to assisted living, they have some home care that comes in and they can stay in their independent living apartment. There is some communities where you move into an apartment and you're independent, you're not on a care plan. But then if you start needing care, you don't have to move apartments. The care will just start putting, they'll just start putting care in where you're at. And then there are some that have a nursing home continuum as well. So if somebody does run out of money or has significant care needs, and they can then move into the nursing home part of the continuum. There are advantages to that and there are drawbacks, and I'm happy to talk to people about what's right for their situation. But again, that's a whole other presentation. But does this make sense with the way the costs break down? And, this one here in the middle is where there are some subsidies for home care and memory care, and less for memory care, but in assisted living to help offset the cost. But Mass Health will not fully subsidize any of these options. There's a couple small programs, but very few people qualify, and there are very few apartments that are available for those. So I don't bother mentioning them. But so there are some subsidies that can help offset the cost here, but by and large, they're private pay, except for this one.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's where I really go into the major difference between these options. And like I said, assisted living is not black and white, and I kind of already talked about this, but the two things you need in order to move into a nursing home on Mass Health is you need to be financially eligible and need help with 2 skilled care needs. I meet a lot of people, or I talk to a lot of people who are financially eligible, but they don't yet have the care needs. And those are the people who would really have benefited from being on a wait list for senior housing, because they take 30% of your income, and the rest of your income you can apply towards your utilities and extra support that you may need. This is those are some of the hardest clients for us to work with, because there's not much that I can do until they have a care need, and who wants to wait until you have a care need, right? It's just not a great place to be in. So assisted living is a social model where they provide custodial care. Assisted livings include 3 meals a day across the board. They include 3 meals a day. They include weekly housekeeping and linen services. Personal laundry is often extra, or family can do it. Utilities are included, except phone and cable sometimes. There's emergency assistance, transportation, social events. That's all included in the room and board. Some communities include some care, some are all inclusive. Those are the exception. It's more common in memory care, but most of the time assisted living has two main contributing costs. One is the room and board, which I mentioned, and the other is care and med management. So depending on, some communities calculate it in packages, some are points, some are levels, but it all roughly ends up being based on how much time a person needs from a caregiver, and their costs will be correlated to that based on industry standard averages and things like that. So the care, and there are some places and there are some people whose care needs are so great that the care cost is actually greater than the rent cost. And those are people maybe who are bedridden and need repositioning and need 2 CNAs or a mechanical lifting device to help them get in and out of bed. They need hand feeding. I mean, really, really heavy care. Then that could be the case. And that the prices there are going to bump up against nursing home prices, but it's a much more home-like environment. The care is much more, tailored to each individual versus, in a nursing home is a lot more task-oriented. So the last option is nursing home. I already talked a little bit about the 2 reasons why somebody needs to live in a nursing home. So we talked a little bit about the cost of staying at home. This is an example that I'm not necessarily going to run through all of, but if this person has a $6,300 in total expenses because they have 4 hours of care and need, 4 hours need of care, then they so they have a $2,300 a month total income, but their expenses are $6,300. There's a big discrepancy there, $3,800. So do they draw, if they have savings, that retirement savings, or if they have, money from somewhere, they can draw upon that and make up the gap. But for how long? How long will that savings last? If they're in the house, that really can't be used as a significant asset. And that's what most people, many people use to fund and move to an assisted living, for example. So you could do a reverse mortgage or home equity line of credit or something like that. I'm not a huge fan of those unless you do a lot of research, but you can draw upon the equity in your home to stay at home. But it's a significant drain on your assets. Assisted living, similarly, or similar comparison, let's say the rent is $8,500 and that includes an hour of care per day, same income. And now $6,000 is the deficit that needs to come out of the assets, except they sold the house. So now with the assets from the sale of the house, if they divide the $6,000 deficit of what they pay to what they owe, it ends up being, in this example, 66 months at $8,500 a month, or 5 years. So basically, somebody who has $2,500 of income each month can afford to live in an assisted living at $8,500 a month for 5.5 years. And so people think that, and that's not cheap. I'm not in any way saying that it's not cheap, but people often think assisted living is not affordable and they dismiss it. But I think it depends. If we're talking about somebody who's 89 and they're not in great health, this is a good number for assisted living. The chances of them running out of money are not that high, and chances of them needing to move to a nursing home for care reasons, we don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did. I'd be a millionaire, but we don't know what's going to happen. So 5 years is a really good number. If I'm talking about somebody who's 79 or 69, then we have to do some additional planning. You're not going to get to Denver. It's literally it's right there. Like there's no configuration of doing anything that is going to get you to Denver. So we need to come up with a backup plan, which is going to involve planning for a nursing home. It doesn't mean you can't go into an assisted living for a while or stay home, but it does mean that there's a red flag, and the runway is probably not long enough for you to financially stay in another care setting. So, this is a difficult conversation, and it's a difficult process to work through. I like to do this with the adult children first, and we don't need specifics, but just get a ballpark of what we're looking at. If this is not long enough, then maybe we look at different locations and we try to find assisted living in the 6,500 range. It's possible. It may be farther away than you want to be, but that's going to increase this number. So there's some flexibility here, but this is the important thing: is define your goal and define whether you have the resources and the direction to get where you want to go. So this is where, I think budgeting for your goals is really important. Don't just set out and look for what you want and look for what you're or whatever, because that's, sure, it might work, but at some point you're going to have more figuring out to do. And if you do all this first, then it will help guide your decisions now. But here are some of the ways that you can have money to use, but irrevocable. So I highly recommend you consult with an elder law attorney. I am not an elder law attorney, but if you are going to do mass health planning and asset protection, you need to know about irrevocable trusts, or irrevocable. I don't know which way is the right way to say it. And there are annuities. I've talked to a lot of people for whom this was a poor decision, but for their personal situation. But you can take assets and turn it into income, and that will help you also qualify for Mass Health, which is an asset-based program, not income-based. You can get a reverse mortgage, free up some equity on your home. Of course, if you have long-term care insurance, then I can almost guarantee that we can keep you out of a nursing home, depending on what that policy looks like. A life care settlement, some people have whole life policies and they don't have a beneficiary that needs the money. And so they're able to sort of take the cash value from the whole life policy. And then there's aid and attendance pension. I calculated that into the example before. So if you notice that on the slide, this is what I'm talking about. Wartime veterans, you had to have spent at least 1 day in active duty, from my understanding, in order to qualify for this benefit. There's other parameters, and I have resources I can send you if you are interested in learning more about this. But veterans themselves or their surviving spouses are eligible for a fairly significant amount of money that will pay towards the cost of home care or assisted living. I'm most familiar with the surviving spouse benefit, and it's around $1,400 a month. I think at the moment. It changes every year. But the veteran themselves or the veteran with a dependent spouse is more. It's even like $2,200 a month towards the cost of assisted living. So that can, especially if you get it early on, that can really help, stretch out your runway and how long you can afford assisted living for. There are income-based services and housing, as I mentioned. And if you know that the funds are likely not going to last somebody's life and be able to provide the care they need, then you should do some mass health planning. I'm a huge advocate of backup plans. I think I mentioned earlier, with the seatbelt, but we don't intend to get into an accident when we put a seatbelt on. But if we do, we're so much better off having it on than wishing we did. So if we have you're better off having a plan and never needing it. I spent all this time making a plan and I never needed it. Great. Than wishing you had a plan and needing one, but not having it. So it's, kind of we all have a lot on our plates. I'm a sandwiched adult child as well. My parents and I have a small child, and I have a business, and I I say all these things, but I realize the reality of having to prioritize these things. And it's why a lot of people do wait until there's a crisis to figure it out, because we're not all just sitting around being like, well, I think I'll look into senior care today. But there are a lot of support options out there, a lot of resources. You can reach out to us. My goal is not to convince anybody to move any sooner than they're ready, but to help them understand, sort of this whole process and this whole spectrum, so that planning doesn't feel so daunting and that you can have at least some semblance of a plan. I will tell you that if you are in a place where you feel like you need a plan and you don't have one, and you work with a professional to come up with a plan and a backup plan, you will sleep better. You will feel better. We carry around this anxiety we may not even acknowledge about what's going to happen when our parents need care. And so, having a direction that you can go in when and if the crisis occurs will make a big difference in your ability to not spend energy. You can spend your energy in other places and your time in other places, because you'll be able to know you have a plan in place. And to be honest, I think that you said earlier that it's a kind thing to do, and it is. But this is also a way to get your loved ones buy-in, and this is kind of what I did with my dad. But you don't. Sometimes, even lying through your teeth, like, you don't need to move now. Everything is just fine. Meet them where they're at, and then say, but if something does happen, not when, but if something does happen, I'm going to be the one that has to figure it out. I'm going to have to figure out what kind of care, what your care looks like. And I would really like to know what you want. What would you like to have happen if that occurs? If you say when, you're going to start getting some mental blocks. But and most people that I'm aware of are agreeable to helping their children or their loved ones put a plan in place if they're going to have to make a decision, because again, they don't want to be a burden on their family. And then that's one of the ways you can harness that and use that to help them plan with you.
Yeah. Michelle, we have a question. Define terms, attendance pension. What does that mean? Attendance pension.
Yeah. So it's the VA. I went pretty fast through all of this. The VA aid and attendance pension.
Oh,
so
okay.
Aid and attendance is what it's usually called, just aid and attendance. And this is a program through the VA. You can talk to the Veterans Service agent in your town. They're usually out of the Councils on Aging as well, but there are a lot of other resources that you can get direct information about this program. But there's a financial criteria, a care criteria, and other, like, service dates and discharge rules and things like that. So when you look at all of those things put together, a person may be eligible for, and there's a home care amount too, but it's over $1,000 a month that will contribute towards the cost of assisted living or home care. So it's fairly a substantial benefit, and it's absolutely worth looking into if you have a loved one that is a veteran. Not everyone qualifies because they weren't in service during a period of war, or again, it's not my area of expertise, but I do know. And if you go to my website, I have a resources page where all of this is links. But you can definitely find out about if your loved one was a veteran or their surviving spouse, and they were not viewed a veteran spouse, then you are not eligible for aid and attendance benefits.
More like a comment. I really appreciated the slide that you had that broke down the differences between, living at home, having somebody staying with you, and then assisted living, because it seems like there's a stereotype still for some people that when you are not living in your home and there's a lot of old people there, they think it's a nursing home.
Yeah.
Or the
Well,
home. So
one of my favorite parts about my job is getting somebody to go tour an assisted living, because many elderly people, the only perception they have is from where their parents or their grandparents were. And it was very old school. And there is a big difference between nursing homes and assisted living communities. Although I have gone on tours with like 99-year-old people that are like, well, there was just a bunch of old people in here. So age is subjective. It's a matter of how you feel about yourself, which is great. But some of these places, some of the newer ones, especially, like you would think you're walking into like a luxurious hotel resort. No joke. And the food is restaurant quality, restaurant style. They're not inexpensive, these places, but they definitely are not nursing home like. And there's everything in between. So my goal, in order to help people perceive the value of what they could be getting, because if they just sit at home and imagine that it's a nursing home, of course, people are going to be resistant. But once they get a chance to see like how nice it is and how much easier life could be, then people become more open. Sometimes that happens through a trial stay, or it's called a respite. So this is something that I advocate for a lot with my clients is and I have a lot of different ways to pitch this based on what I've seen be most successful over all these years, but try it out for a month. Give it a shot. Coming out of rehab is the perfect time for that. Go from rehab right into an assisted living for a little while you work on getting stronger, and then you can talk about going back home. But trial stays almost always serve to get people to realize, I don't want to go home. I like the meals. I like, my maintenance-free life, and they choose to stay.
Yeah. And I can imagine it's good for people who live alone, maybe divorced, widowers, or just, they just live alone. So, the social part, I think that's one of the ways you described assisted living is like a social model, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of solo agers, they're called, and people who aren't necessarily social still benefit. So I'm not a big joiner, which is interesting because I was an activities director. I like to lead groups, but I'm not big into small talk or activities I'm not really interested in. So if I moved into a community like that, I'm probably not going to participate in a lot of the things that are going on. But if there's something I'm interested in, I will. And going to the meals, I still am going to be interacting with people and meeting and doing things. And so even if that's all somebody really is participating with, it does help so much. They may do it begrudgingly, going to the dining room because, you've lived in your own home all these years and you don't necessarily want to go into a dining room. But again, most people come around and realize that like, this is better than it was before. They should check it out for themselves, and see what I'm talking about.
I love the idea of that. I love the idea of what you just shared as far as using an assisted living as a respite. Is there a waiting list for that? And how soon, if somebody was in rehab, would you ask your case manager to look for a respite near you? And is there a wait list? And how much?
Yeah, so I think it goes in the reverse order. Like, I think that, and this is, marketing of me, but I think that you should tell the case manager that you're working with a company like Two Sisters Senior Living Advisors to find a respite. So because it's not a discharge to a medical model, the discharge planners can call around and try to find a respite, but they don't often have time for that. And so that's and there are other companies that are like mine, but that's kind of what we do. Most places, if there is an available apartment, will do a respite stay. They don't hold an apartment for short-term or respite. So if they're full, then there isn't necessarily going to be a respite opportunity. Most communities have a minimum of 30 days. There are some that are less, but I personally think that you need at least 30 days to really get a sense of, but respites can be used for a number of different things. Sometimes the caregiver's going out of town, or there's any number of reasons. If it's a spouse, the spouse is going to have a procedure done and won't be able to care for it. So you can use a respite or short-term stay in a number of different ways, but sort of showing somebody that what they could have. In terms of wait lists and availability, there are definitely pockets and communities that I know typically run full, and it would be difficult to get a respite at, but I have usually at least once a week somebody who calls me whose loved one is being discharged from rehab all of a sudden, and they're not sure what to do, and we're able to get them into an assisted living really quickly. It's not necessarily a comfortable process. I do not advocate for that. In 12 years, I had a same day move in once, but that it's difficult. So if you can avoid that by doing some planning ahead of time, but in a scenario where there is a crisis, there's stuff we can do. I can help. And even if I've had a couple situations recently where it's just to stabilize, just get things to a place where we can take a breath and then look at the long-term plan, get on a wait list for a nursing home or whatever it may be, put all the places in, all the pieces in place that you would need in order to make home care successful. Having somebody go to an assisted living for a month gives you the breathing room to gather up all that stuff and come up with a longer plan. So there's a number of reasons why a short-term or a respite stay in assisted living can be beneficial, but there's not always availability, and I'm happy to help. But
so if somebody was really a planner, really proactive, lives alone, they know they're going to go to rehab, maybe they're having a total hip or something or total knee, and they know, and they live in a place that has a lot of stairs, would they be able to go to their nearest or nearby assisted living and start maybe, making an appointment, talking to the administrators there, seeing if there's any room available just in case, when he's ready, he or she's ready, they can go there?
Yeah. And I think that if you're talking about somebody who is still physically able, but they're having, a total knee or something like that, they may not need physical assistance. When they leave rehab, they may not need physical assistance to go to the bathroom. They may not be able to do the stairs, and they may not be able to do a lot of the housekeeping and cooking because, they're recovering, but they may not, and in which case an independent living would be really appropriate. Most independent living communities include one meal a day or a meal and a continental breakfast or and you can get additional meals, but it's all one floor. You don't have to worry about changing a light bulb. You don't have to worry about paying, most of your utilities are included, all the things that I mentioned in an in an assisted living, except the care. But if somebody is coming out of rehab and they do need assistance in walking and ambulating, or they do need assistance to shower, then absolutely. Assisted living is you don't have to stay in the nursing home. You don't have to stay in rehab just because you can't go home. If you have some private pay ability, then there are some nice options out there.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's great. I'm glad you brought that up, because I never really thought of that. It's either, you go to rehab, then you go home, and then, depending on the support system that a person has, then there's the big worry, who's going to take care of me? PT can only come maybe once a day, or OT, whoever it is that, you need. So, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
This is a big reason why I love my job. There are resources, there are things that can be done, either, Band-Aids to put in place until we figure out how to, heal the wound underneath, but it is hard. It doesn't have to be quite as hard.
I like to end with asking the guest, what is the one thing that you want us to take away from your talk today? What is that one thing?
Make a plan. Do some research ahead of time. It will benefit you. You'll feel better. If you never need that plan, that's okay. I'd rather have wasted your time having you do research that is not needed than calling me in a crisis, or calling, finding another crisis.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. It's always good to have a plan. It's always good to have a plan. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, how can people learn more about you before we end this program? If they have any more questions.
Yeah. Well, we have a pretty active website, and we've been around for a while, so we're Googleable. My company is with the number 2 sisters, and we have a Facebook page. My sister and I have a podcast, which is taken off a lot better than we anticipated it was going to. But as sandwich adult caregivers, we talk about that a lot. But yeah, you can reach out to us in any number of ways. You can schedule an appointment to have a free introductory call with me right from my website. But yeah, we're around.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And I'd love to have you back again, because I know you have so much to talk about. There's so many different topics out there that's going to really help all of us age wisely. So yes. I want to thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Also, I want to thank the Quincy Health Department for continuing to sponsor this program. And I want to thank Tufts Medical Center, of course, the trauma department, for allowing me to be able to do this outreach work out in the community. So until then, be well and be safe, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.